Hey everybody, welcome to Go to Your Room and Make Stuff, the podcast about making art, any kind of art, all by ourselves in a room or a studio, maybe outside. No one is telling us when, where, or how, or any combination of those things. This is a podcast for solo artistic adventurers, those who are doing it and those who want to try it. Support, ideas, and just plain fun. Hi, welcome to the podcast. We are interviewing Eileen Descallar today, and I'm totally excited because I've known her and I've seen her at conferences and I've, hung out, but I have never really dove into her work. And she's always got a camera in her hands. So I had a pretty good feeling that she was into photography. And today when I was in her website, and everyone should check it out, and it's in the links, there's some beautiful stuff in there. And then I found out that she rock climbs, and not like I rock climb, which is, I will occasionally rope up and be top rope with someone else and like go up like 15 feet and be like, yeah, I'm so cool. No, she really rock climbs. I could tell by the photos in there. And she also does voiceover. So welcome. And let's just talk about all the places where you do your art, which obviously is not always in a room. That was the big thing I noticed, is that your room tends to also be outside.
True.
So welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So before we dive into details, let us get to know you a little bit better. Is there something about yourself that is a fun or unique fact that listeners might not know about you?
You mentioned photography, you mentioned voice acting, but I was also UCLA's women's fencing team captain.
Oh, that's cool. Do you still fence?
I do not. But
That's amazing.
Maybe
I
recreationally
find fencing
sometime.
to be absolutely fascinating. And I've never gone anywhere near it, but it is so much fun to watch. And yeah. And you also scuba dive, yes?
Mm-hmm. Haven't gone in a while,
And
but I'm certified and, again, would love to go back in.
and I was going to ask too, some of the anemone photographs I saw, were those underwater photography?
No, that was in an aquarium, but it looked pretty good, didn't it?
It looked great. As someone who's done some a long time ago underwater photography, which is really challenging, they look great. No, you did a fantastic job.
Yes.
Mostly I took pictures of the backs of fish's tails.
Yes, I
They
have
were
some of those if
leaving.
you saw those outside of the water. And I've done some underwater with my GoPro, but, it's not like a still. I looked at an underwater casing, but that's just a whole nother
Oh, it's like buying a
realm.
car.
Yeah,
It's like buying
exactly.
a car. And we still have all of our underwater housings and lights and everything. But man,
Oh,
the cameras have changed so much. And this is all from like 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, we're going back 15 years. I don't know. I'm so proud of the stuff we have hanging on the walls.
oh
But
gosh, I have to
it's
see it.
it's a really expensive hobby. So, all right. So tell us about your art medium and or mediums.
Okay, so I sometimes explain that I am a visual and audio creative. So I definitely work in visual and audio, visual photography, but also graphic design. And so a lot of that is like related to my day job. So I have a day job doing a lot of design work, and they actually tapped into my photography once they discovered I did that as well. And then I've always created visually, starting from crayons. But along with that was, animation. Some of my first things I was drawing were flip books because I was like, how do they do that? And then I don't know if I saw it on TV or something where they're like, this is how animation is done. And then my dad had tons of these cards that were kind of stiff. Later on, I learned they were from like computers, like ancient days where they fed like computer cards. And so he had tons of them that were, I don't know, we took them home. Like they were just, he didn't program computers, but he had them. And so I was like, these are great. And so I would just draw like on them and flip through them. But then the little holes would get in the way sometimes. So that was like one of my first, I'm going to do this. And I loved color. So like big box of crayons was my thing. And this was like crossing of streams too. Okay, I'll introduce the other thing I was doing too, was writing. So in 4th grade, I won our little class talent show by writing a story and reading it out loud. And I won a big box of crayons. So I was
sweet.
like, so I was like, writing, audiobooks, kind of, right? I performed it.
It
And
counts.
then
Yeah.
and then I won crayons. So I was like, this is wonderful. Yeah, so that's that side of thing. And then we'll go into the voice acting part. I realized after a while that I hadn't read anything for pleasure in a long time. I was an English major. So once you become an English major, you stopped reading anything but it was required because you didn't have much time. At least I didn't. And then after graduating, I'm going like, when was the last time I just read something? I'm not reading enough. So
Yeah.
I know what. I will revisit some of these authors that maybe I didn't get a chance to study in depth or that I liked, and maybe I hadn't read all their work. And I'm going to find their works and I'm going to read them and create audiobooks and a
Oh,
podcast. Right. So
okay.
I had a podcast. This was before I'm dating myself, before iTunes. So
Gotcha.
you just had these websites that would list podcasts. And so
Yes.
they're like, oh, it's really easy. And I have this pretty much of a geek background. So, I was already doing things with I think I was already doing Photoshop, whatever I was doing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this can't be that hard. So I figure it out. I have a little the USB mic that's for the little neck things.
Oh, yes.
And I just started recording and I picked works from the public domain.
Right.
Right. And so there's a lot of them from Edgar Allan Poe, just classic
Okay.
authors. So I'm like, I'm going to read things I haven't read before. And I think I even went to the library, how are audiobooks made? And I didn't have much, I couldn't find much. But I'm like, I think this is what we should do. So I recorded them, I chopped them up, and then I did a little intro and then released them as
Okay.
episodes.
This podcast is brought to you by the Seattle Voice Academy, and your host runs the podcast and the Seattle Voice Academy. This online voice school specializes in vocal health, singing, voiceover, and public speaking. Come check us out, seattlevoiceacademy.com.
And so
Before everyone was on YouTube doing it. I mean, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Before there was ways to, and then some people found me and I had a website and, they would comment and stuff. So that was kind of nice. And then eventually I put a little button, as people were doing for donations. And I got a little donation and someone gave me, I think it was $50. I'm like, I can upgrade my mic. So
Right.
I went to Radio Shack and I got.
Oh, hey, at least it wasn't Guitar Center. See, you're okay.
Yeah, it's Radio Shack, but they told me to buy a dynamic mic. So it was it's a kind of mic you'd have on stage, right?
Oh, like a Shure 58 or singing mics. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
called a directional mic. Yeah.
So I was saying well, I don't. It's kind of noisy because they were asking me questions, but I had no clue about that. I only researched the part about the technical stuff. I was using Audacity to cut up my audiobook things.
It's free. I mean, I said it, we broke up years ago. However, it's free and it does work.
Yes,
and you weren't using GarageBand. You weren't using GarageBand.
No. Well, I couldn't afford a Mac, so I was. Even though I went to design school with a PC, that was a whole nother adventure. By the way, that was 30% of us were using PCs, the rest of them were using Macs, and they were kind of looking down at us, But by the end, when I graduated, it was 50-50. And one of my design jobs, they hired me partly because I knew how to design in both Mac and PC.
Oh, that's cool.
And
I should mention, by the way, she's talking on a 416 in Studio Bricks right now. Yeah. For everyone who knows what I just said, she's a really nice setup.
Yes, I've had a glow up since then with the studio equipment.
Yeah, I'm loving your studio. If you're not watching this later, you should go online and just take a look because it looks really, really good. So, what mic did you buy at Radio Shack?
Oh God, it was I don't even know the name of it. I still own it. It's somewhere in a closet.
Oh yeah, I sometimes I sell my mics, but they're kind of like children. Mostly there's at my feet down here. I have a great many mics at my feet.
I have another mic. I have a Synco D2 at my feet, which is
okay.
What I went through. So I went from the Radio Shack to the Synco D2, which was great, and I used it for paid work and everything. And then I only found the 416 because it was a used sale from a fellow voice actor.
Mine was also from a fellow voice actor. I mean, most of my mics. This one I bought new, but no, a lot of my mics I get secondhand.
I've been looking at that. I have this, and I have an AKG C214, which is there's a dual mount thing here. Yeah. So I use that for video games or whatever requires kind of that character work. And then this though, the booth. I also got it used. Yes.
Oh, that's so cool. I see.
It was such a
I am
good
going to
deal.
eventually own one. Right now, I'm very happy in my little Harry Potter closet. But eventually, if I'm not in my perfectly built, and it really is silent in here. If I'm not in my perfectly built Harry Potter, it's going to be Studio Bricks triple walled.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll go with pink. I think I'll go with a different color. I have to ask, what color is your Studio Bricks?
It's just the white, but
A lot of people
I
have
like
white.
it. You
But
know,
you and I have a friend in common. Hers is bright pink, which is
yes,
so cool, by the
it's
way.
so lovely and it's big and yeah,
Uh-huh.
triple wall. See, I have double,
Yeah.
which
Okay.
is great. It's great.
Anything's better than single. If anyone's listening, and for those of you who haven't been like, oh my gosh, talking about the weirdest stuff, it's noise cancellation for audiobook and voiceover work. And single wall, you just don't bother. Double and triple are fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, that being said, before this setup, I lived in a different location and the room I was in was quiet enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had basically, those easy up tents.
Yes.
So it was like that skeleton, which is
Okay.
metal, right? That
Yeah.
skeleton, but it was 4 feet by 4 feet. They called it a
Okay.
changing cabana, right? So then I put moving blankets around it for the
Perfect.
walls and one on
Yeah.
top, and there was a carpeted floor. And
Yeah.
so when it was quiet, relatively quiet, I could record. I recorded a lot. Like I
Of
had sound
course.
engineers be like, "Your sound is great. When are you in?" So that was great. But
There's no
it
need to
was
spend a
still,
lot of money if the environment you're in is conducive to moving blankets and PVC pipe. Yeah. So just
yeah.
people should know that. You don't have to buy a Studio Bricks until you're like, I really need a Studio Bricks. It's
And it just opens up the time.
yeah.
I feel so much better, like, okay, I can record it this time if there's a live directed
My
session.
neighbors can
Yeah.
my neighbors can do they can mow the lawn. I'm okay.
Yeah.
Dogs, however, come right in. I have a corgi, and so the barking, so no, they get
Corgi.
crated. And of course, this morning they're not crated, so we'll see what happens. It's very exciting. But if there's a session happening, those dogs are where they cannot make noise.
Yeah.
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 Sweet. Okay, so I want to ask more about your voiceover and what kinds of stuff you really love. I heard you say animation. So what and audiobooks both. So what is it you love to do? What is it you want to do more of? That stuff.
I love to do all the things. Now,
I know, right?
this is kind of a theme of my life. So I was a Girl Scout. I'm still answering your question, by the way. But they had little badges, and one of my favorite badges to earn was called Dabbler. Because it would take that section and you could do different things from the other different badges and earn this one badge. Because I was like, I want to earn that. I want to earn that. Um, and I'm kind of like that now, especially with voiceover, because I just started discovering more genres and going, that sounds great. So what I'm doing more now, I suppose, is dubbing, live
Yeah.
action. I have done an animation one as well, and then video games. And I
Yeah.
love that. I did not start with that. I started with audiobooks, as we discussed, and then corporate narration, and then super local radio, you know,
Mhm.
like,
And you're in LA, the LA area, correct?
yes. I
Yeah.
only moved to actual LA. People will understand if they live here. So my address is Los Angeles now. Last September. So
Okay.
before that, I was living in Ventura, which is a city in the county north of LA.
What's your
And
commute if you're dubbing, if you're in Ventura?
well, from Ventura, I cheated and I would stay at a friend's
That's what I
house.
thought.
Yeah.
Because I have family in Orange, but
Yeah.
that's a very long drive to Studio City.
Yeah. Orange is still farther than I was from Ventura just because of traffic wise. But
Yeah.
a drive it'd be reasonable. It
Okay.
could be an hour and a half, you
Oh,
know.
each way.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
each way.
dubbing
It
is
could be
one
a
of
lot
those
longer.
have you ever done dubbing in your Studio Bricks, or are you going into the studio?
I've done both.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Which do you prefer?
Well, timing in my studio bricks is really nice because I can just walk in and do it.
Yeah.
Um, but in the studio, it's really nice because you don't have to worry about the technical stuff or,
Right.
maybe something will come through. This is a double, not a triple. But
Do
yeah,
you have any latency or timing issues? I've never done dubbing, so this is something I know, like, nothing about.
yeah, I didn't experience that. But, my
Cool.
directors were also remote, so
Okay.
it's occasionally they'd be like, hold on. But it was usually something, actual noise on their end. I remember one time I was like, there's a storm out here. I was like, okay, all right. you know, We'll
Sweet.
hold.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about the photography too. I mean, I got on and got to see it, and I'm going to be posting links to a lot of these photos so that you guys should all go and you should take a look at the gallery on your website. So, I guess tell us about your camera. I don't know. Let's talk about photography.
Sure, sure. So photography, my dad had a camera, and he had like a makeshift darkroom, which was carved
Mm.
as part of like the kitchen area. And now that I think about it, like my mom must have hated that. I mean, it was like you walked into the area that was like the small galley kitchen and kind of like where the dining room table was, and sort of this extra space, which
Yeah.
was like, I don't know what the people who made the house envisioned it to be because it wasn't big enough for really anything. Like at one time we had a small TV there and like a tiny couch, because the actual living room was like got way too hot all the time. So he had this little dark room and I'd be like, wow, that's cool. You go in there and you move the sheets and it's all dark. And so, you know, I was a bookworm, right? So fantasy, sci-fi, it'll be like, oh, yeah, it's gonna be like the wardrobe and Narnia, and I'm gonna transport. And so like I liked it because of that. But then later on, I was like, what does he actually do in there? And then what is his camera stuff? And eventually he gave me like a point and shoot camera, and I would just try and take things. And then much later on, much later on, I basically um was gonna take a camera class and use his camera, and I think I had not yet signed up, but I was going to, and then it was stolen out of my mom's car. So it's
Oh
like, oh.
no.
So then I delayed until digital cameras came out, and then I
Oh
I started
wow.
with that.
Okay.
Yeah, so
And did your dad shoot in black and white or color or both?
oh, usually color. I mean,
My dad was a black and white photographer. That's why I ask.
oh, yeah,
Um,
that's cool.
yeah, and I love on your
Yeah,
website how you talk about the magic
yeah,
of those curtains. I think that's really cool.
yeah. So
That's
that was definitely like, but it was ironic though because he wants to take pictures of his family, obviously, but we were just so sick of like, oh my God, it's gonna take forever. We gotta have pictures, and it'd be a lot of the group pictures, which as you get older, you realize why, right? And
yeah,
like it's your family
yeah.
and they're growing up, and this is an occasion, and when do all I have a lot of relatives, like, all of us get together at the same time now. Um, but yeah, I was just like, "Oh god, we wanna play, we wanna do this, or we wanna eat, or we wanna open our Christmas presents," right? So, that kinda came back to me. I was like, whenever I have a client that's like, maybe it's a kid and they're shy, I'm like, "Oh, no, this I understand."
Yeah.
So, we'll do that. And then when I went to Europe, um, I took the camera, my little point and shoot. And that's when I really was like trying to document, like photojournalistic and capture my memories, but also get some artistic ones. Now, the problem
Yeah.
was I didn't know this, but I put a roll back in the camera. So I have double
Oh.
exposures. I
Oh, so you
have,
might have had some cool experiments.
I did. I have like a dove from Notre Dame stained glass in the underground. Like, and
That's cool. Accidental cool. That's accidentally really cool.
yeah, I was like, "This is cool." But then also, obviously, I missed up, like, "Oh, great. So the pictures from France and England are mashed up," and,
That
anyway.
remembers me how we used to have to wait.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm going back 25 years to where we used to take the pictures and then and I had a boyfriend whose family used to develop film. So it was that whole developing process, and then you found out if you did a good job or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then digital altered all that.
Yep.
And so, wow. So tell me more about like when you start to get into the digital photography and how that affected you and your cameras and
Oh, yeah.
the art and
So, I got a digital one. Can't even remember what it was now. I think it was, like, some plastic thing that wasn't even a brand name, but it was digital,
yeah.
and then it was kinda like, "Oh, I could just take a bunch of pictures and see how they look like," but then there was a whole process getting on your computer, but again, like, the tech part of me saved me, right? So I was like,
Right?
"I can do this." Um, but then I started to be like, "Hey, this Europe picture," one of the ones I took was a Windsor castle, and I turned it black and white. I remember I photoshopped out, like, a electric line or something that was on it, and I found a stock photography site, and I put some photos on there, and someone bought the photo.
Oh,
And I was like,
wow.
I someone bought my photo. Like, I wasn't even really trying. What if I actually tried?
Okay.
So I think that's when I went out and got, and it wasn't like, the next year when I came back from Europe, it was like years later. That's when I got my first digital camera that was like prosumer-ish,
Okay.
approaching prosumer, which was a Rebel, Canon Rebel.
Okay.
And then
Cannons, yeah.
I shot some stuff with that. I sold another, stock photography shot. I'd already been doing a little graphic design as part of my job, but it wasn't my main job. So I had like a kind of an eye for like, oh, if I was going to put this in a layout, I would want a lot of white space.
Mhm.
I would want room for copy. I would want this. I want it to be more versatile. Like maybe
Right.
they'll put it here, maybe they'll put it there. Um, so that helped. And then I was outside and all of that was just, that was the artistic part. It was kind of like, I'm going to take, this is so beautiful. You can't capture it exactly, the experience, but I can try, and so I learned a lot. And then once HDR technique came out, which is, high dynamic range
Okay. I was gonna
photography,
ask what it stands for, yeah.
you
Okay.
take multiple exposures and then it will like blend them so that it can be closer to what the eye sees. Because we can see a
Okay.
lot more change in exposure, like the darkness, brightness, than the camera can see. And so some people, when it first was discovered, they used it to make like really super saturated photos. And it kind of blew people away at first. They're like, oh my God, look at that. That's so magical. But it wasn't realistic,
Right.
but that's part of the charm of it. It was like, that's magical. So, but for me, I was trying to more look like, this is what I see. It's already magical. It doesn't need to look. Some of them I would, kind of say looked a little cartoony in a way,
Mhm.
so which has its place. But I was like, let's see what happens. So I remember I treated one of my photos kind of the trend at the time, and then one where I felt like it was more realistic. And I think it wasn't a good experiment because I think I only sold one print of that,
Okay.
which was the realistic one. But
Hmm.
that was like a trend that happened. Yeah, and then I just upgraded my camera again. I love shopping used. So I ended up eventually with a 5D Mark II, which I got used. I have the Workhorse 2470L Canon lens, which is like a
Canon lens,
zoom.
okay.
Yeah, which is really great.
Okay.
And then I started getting into more professional work. And after I worked at a magazine for a little while, and they were telling us for the longest time, like, you know, you guys are going to get laid off, essentially. I had a very interesting boss. He was not filtered at all. So,
Okay.
so he would just be like, you're all going to get fired. I was like, what? And then, but really the thing was we could either go to work in the downtown LA office. Mind you, this is
Okay.
when I was living in Ventura. Like,
Ooh,
yeah,
that's brutal.
you can
Okay.
go
Yeah.
and you'll have your job, or you're just going to be gone. And at the time, I was already doing some graphic design work on the side.
Okay.
I had all these websites up to sell like t-shirts and mugs and stuff for my niche interests. Like, so I have a store that has like fencing. It's called Fencing Wear. And it's like, clothing for fencers. Um, and then
Like you do.
yeah,
I
like
love
I
it, by
do.
the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you do. And then I went for rock climbing, which actually became more of a full-blown website.
Okay.
So that's more of like a community and then happens to have a store, right? So these were going on, and I remember thinking like, you know, my income on that is starting to go up. Like the little chart of income is not quite where I want it to be, but eventually when it gets to a certain point, I'm going to quit this job. So I was going like, well, I guess I'll just quit a little earlier. Um, and then it was nice because they gave us a separation package, not a severance
Yeah.
package, but a separation. I was
Okay.
like, this is better than me quitting. So I was
Right.
able to do that. And then at that point, I was full-time graphic design photography. And then I became a sponsored rock climber for a year during that time period as
That's
well.
really badass, by the way. So you actually go high. Okay, all right. Okay? I don't speak rock climber very well. Have you done things harder than a 5.9?
Yes, yeah.
That's what I figured. Okay, what's the hardest thing you've done? And then you have to explain what you're saying because I barely understood what I just said.
Okay, so, there's a rating system, and
There we go.
it's a little bit like if you're familiar with earthquake and magnitude, it's not like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like the difference between a 5 okay, well, the difference between a 4 and a 5 is, like, vastly different. It's so different that
Right.
they start saying, like, climbing starts at 5 point
Okay.
something, and that's when you have to use your hands. Like, there's
Yes.
no 4 is, like, 1 through 4, like, 1 is walking on smooth pavement, you know? Like, and then there's various stages, and then there's kinda, like, hiking in this terrain, that terrain, and 4 is sort of, like, occasionally
Bouldering.
you might use your hands, occasionally.
Okay.
5 is,
Okay.
like, you have to use your hands to make any
Yes.
progress, and then so because, like, it's that system, everything in rock climbing is 5 point something,
Right.
except the highest rating used to be 5.10. Like,
Oh, see, I knew I was guessing
yeah,
something
it
high
should
up
go
there.
by
Okay, good.
it should
Okay.
go by 6, like, the next but then it was like but this was d invented a long time ago before, like,
Right.
modern stuff happened, like sticky rubber on your shoes that made you go up stuff that looks incredibly blank.
Right.
So they couldn't say, like, "Oh, this is now 6," like, because what are we gonna do? So they started going, like, 5, you know, 10,
11.
A,
5.
B,
Okay.
C, D, and then they went to 11 because it
I
was
should mention one of the
yeah.
pictures of Ellen, she's wedged in a crevice. I'll put it on so people can see it. She's wedged in a crevice, and I'm just like, "Oh, she really climbs."
Yeah. So the jokes of my name, Eileen, there's 2, like, either they start breaking out singing "Come on, Eileen,"
Right.
or occasionally they'll do the knock knock joke with Eileen Dover and fell down, depending on what rating you wanna do that joke on. And then,
Okay.
but the rock climbing ones are like, "I leaned over and fell off a cliff."
Oh,
Uh-huh.
gee.
So
So you were a professional rock climber for a year?
yes, yes.
Okay.
Um,
And I'm assuming the camera was not around your neck, for obvious reasons. Although cameras started getting smaller.
yeah, no, it was,
Did you cl
I brought a regular SLR up a couple of climbs. Excuse me, I'm gonna
Okay.
take a step.
Oh, yeah, some water.
So, I brought a professional camera up a couple of climbs, and I would have them in a pack, or had a special
Okay.
sling. Um, Other times, I would go there and be the photographer. So, I'd
Okay.
have a separate rope and, like, go up that rope and take pictures of someone else climbing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you were photographing the climbers. I saw some of those.
yeah.
Those were cool.
And then
And also, I have to bring up, you have been to one of my favorite places. You have been down Havasupai Canyon, Havasu Falls, and Mooney Falls,
yes,
which is in Arizona.
yes.
So, yes, I have. That's one of the places I've been, but that didn't require any ropes. There is a chain though you hold on to going down
Mooney
Mooney
Falls,
Falls.
yeah.
Yeah, that I was in 8th grade. I should mention this was not yesterday. Yeah,
They,
beautiful.
actually, when I went down Mooney Falls, I was prepared to, we brought a rope just in case, and someone
Yeah.
had put a ladder in there.
You know, it needed it when I went. 'Cause if 39 years later, I can distinctly remember every minute of that climb. It was yeah, I'm glad, and I remember my friend's dad helping a great deal because we were 8th graders.
Yeah, yeah.
Boy, the beauty of that place, though.
It's so
Oh,
beautiful, and I did take a SLR camera and a wide angle lens and, a portable tripod because I wanted to capture the falls. I mean, that was just such a
and she
highlight.
did.
Yeah.
You should all go on and take a look at when you see the falls on her website, those at least some of them are those Arizona falls. And it's about 11 miles in if anybody wants to buy her photos because the hike in and the hike out are brutal. If you
Yes.
do decide to do it, get the donkeys to carry your pack back out because there's how many? I can't remember how many switchbacks. It's 11 miles and a lot of switchbacks.
Yes, a lot, a lot. Though when I hiked Mount Whitney, there's an area called 99 Switchbacks, so I don't think there were 99 for for Havasu, but
Okay, that's that right there. And I've hiked. Have you done the enchantments up here? Have you ever done the
I
enchantment
have
hike?
not, I've not,
Oh man, you got to do
I
that. I've
have
done that twice.
I've
Whew,
been up in the area, like, several times, but I've climbed Mount Baker, so that was my
oh yeah,
first, glacier mountaineering
that's not a
summit.
small mountain. That's huge. That's a big deal. You've climbed Baker? Holy cow! Yeah, she can. She mountain climbs. I'll just say right there. That's a big glacier up there.
It was a lot of fun.
We have a lot of big volcanoes up here. The mountains up here are not small. They're, they're big.
Yes.
Sweet. Let's see. Talk about if you can talk about recent projects, stuff that you've been working on recently.
Sure. NDAs.
I know, right? It's like, well, Dory, we will skip all of it. Is there anything you can talk about that? So she's on many NDA projects, and they're great. That's all we're going to say about that. Do you have anything that's no longer under NDA?
Yes. So I was in Reimagine 2 Mahal, which is a VR animation. It's available on
Sweet.
any MetaQuest headset. It's free. It's part of there's an VR animation app, and that came out last year, and it premiered at Tribeca, which was
Ooh.
just a crazy thing to be involved with. I right out of college, I went into entertainment marketing industry. So, of course, I knew all about, Sundance, Tribeca, just these big things. I was not going the route of, on camera. I was in the corporate side of things by then. And so to actually then, years later, be at Tribeca, like,
How cool is
because I'm
that?
in something. Um,
Yeah.
so the piece was about it was based on Philippine folklore, but that they took that. It wasn't like a word, one for one kind of thing. There's a own little story going on. And VR animation itself is just really interesting. I hadn't seen VR animation. I've seen like games, little samples of VR over the years. So when I saw it for the first time, which was at Tribeca, I was like, oh my God. Like I'm looking
Right.
around. And, um, yeah, so that was so fun. And then it was submitted to different festivals. I remember, I think at Baltimore Next Festival, it won Best Ensemble Cast, which was really fun.
Nice.
And now the series, because we were kind of, it was Reimagined 2, so it was 1 and 3, obviously. And the series has been nominated for a Peabody. So,
Oh,
and that's recent.
wow.
That just happened. So I'm just like, yeah,
Congratulations.
I think that's really great. And the team, the creator, it's just a really nice project and definitely great artistic vision and someone going, this is a new medium and I want to create something in it. And she'd worked in it before, but this was like really her, like a bigger undertaking, since there
Right.
are like 3 of them and everything. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, really
Do you
cool.
have any mentors? Anybody who, helped get you where you are today?
Oh, I have to give a giant shout out to the entire OG Clubhouse group in the pandemic because that's what I always tell people. That's like kind of my relaunch. The audiobook, the podcast, the very small jobs I did, and the little things I did back then. I kind of just moved away from anything voice. I didn't have a proper recording area. It was kind of a miracle that I got like paid jobs at all, really. And
Right.
then during the pandemic, I got on the audio only app Clubhouse and
Mm-hmm.
just was exploring around and I found all these rooms that were about voice acting.
Yes.
And certain coaches were because we're all stuck at home and they weren't doing in person and they started
Right.
offering stuff online. And it'd be a room and some of them were structured. It was definitely like this is about voice acting. We're going to like have you read scripts. And one by
Yeah.
one you're going to read and we're going to give you feedback. Right. But other ones were just like, we're just going to talk about voice acting or we're voice acting friends. And then I would
Right.
sit and like kind of absorb a lot, just listening to all these people talk. But then some of the reading rooms, Erica Schroeder and Sarah Natacheni, like Sarah is the voice for the longest time of Ash Ketchum. They did a room about animation, naturally,
Yeah.
and they played a game, I guess, that they used to do in person at conferences, which was basically like randomly assigning, creating a Pokemon. And so they
Okay.
pull out like this elemental, and this animal is the inspiration, and this is the vowels are you going to use to create your Pokemon name. So you came up with your name, and then you just had to do
Right.
like 3 things, like you're bursting out of the Pokemon, you're I forgot the other 2 things that you're supposed to do. So basically 3 lines. And so they ask at the beginning, setup of Clubhouse is like there's kind of a stage area. only the people on stage can be heard. The rest of the people are
Right.
kind of like audience, and it's changed.
Or you can raise your
Yeah, it's
hand. Yeah.
changed since
Yeah.
then. So you have to raise your hand. And so they ask you that. But you could see that there's already like 100 people in the audience, but in little
Yes.
people on the stage. And they're just, all you see, by the way, of people on stage is a little circle, just their picture.
Yep.
It's not like a video or anything. So you could just put your phone down and listen, or you can look at the little circles. So I raised my hand because I'm like, I have to do it or I'll chicken out. So I did. And I was like, I'm fourth. I'm fourth. Oh no. like,
Right.
do I put myself back to the audience? Because once you raise your hand and they accept, you're on,
You're in.
your
You're on
circle is
stage.
up there. So they came to me and then I did my character and they're like, wow, okay, now do this, now do that. And then they're telling me to do things that they hadn't done before. Right.
Direction.
Yeah. I was
Direction.
like,
Yeah.
okay. And so I just did them. And this was not the first time I'd seen this room, right? So I knew how it went. So I did that. And then I was so amped up with adrenaline. Like after that, also because the last thing they had me do was like, now yell at 11, like for anger. Right. So I did.
Right.
And then so I listened, as you do during the pandemic and the clubhouse days, for hours. I mean, they literally went through every single person.
Wow.
It was at least 2 hours. But at the
Okay.
end, they said like, okay, so and so, come back up on stage. And my name was mentioned. So now there's like
Yeah.
30 of us total on stage. She's like, well, because a lot of these episodes end with music. Now sing along. I'm like, okay, what is this song? I don't know, and they're trying to play it, but it's in the background. You can't really hear it.
Right.
So you're supposed to sing in your character. So I'm doing that. And also they called me out again. They're like, so-and-so and Eileen, sing. I'm like, okay. So doing that. But to me, it was like, I can't believe they remembered my name from 2 hours ago. How many people? And I was just like, I can do this. I can do animation.
Yeah.
Because before that, I was very realistic. I still think it's realistic to know that a lot of voiceover work is going to be, or it doesn't have to be, but you're going to find some kind of whether it's an audiobook or it's corporate narration, commercial, like these are things that are like either money or steady work, right?
Yeah. Bread and butter.
Yeah,
Yes.
the bread and butter work, right? And until then, it was always like coming from entertainment marketing, and because I had gone to a performing arts school, like in high school for a year, like I have exposure to that side of the performing arts and actors and everything. So I'm like, that is such a hard industry, and I thought like I don't have a chance in it now. I know that sounds incredibly pessimistic, but I wasn't.
Well, it's somewhat realistic depending where you're coming from, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then also I was living in Ventura, which is close enough to LA, but it's within striking a distance.
Yeah.
There's certain people, especially in the southern part of the county, who like totally work in the movie industry or TV industry, and they can do that. But I just felt like, oh, that's just so hard. That drive. Do I have that drive? And then I'm like, well, I'll be realistic and do this because I love audiobooks. I actually even enjoy nonfiction stuff. So like corporate narration works. And this is something I can also do at home and be more flexible with their schedule, like all sorts of like, this is great. I love the voice acting genre, both of them. But because of that aspect where I saw how hard the actors struggle, the on camera and on theater, I just thought like,
Yes.
ooh, can I do that for voice animation? But once I did that, I was like, I can and I will. It was I can and I will.
So I have to ask, what is your journey out of the pandemic then into doing animation?
So that was it took first of all, tons of classes, tons of workshops.
Right.
And
Right.
of course, shout out to Seattle Voice Academy because I did a corporate narration class early on. I think it was still the pandemic. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think it was too. Yeah.
Because again, this was part of my like, what can I do and what have I done? And I just need to get better at this and just see more opportunities. So I took that class and I was like, this is a great academy, one. yeah, because I was like, one, all of it was there. There's like, these are great teachers. Um, it's reasonable price. The class size is good, and it's
Mm-hmm.
teaching you things, actual teaching you. It's not.
It was,
Yeah,
teaching's really important to us. Like, that's the more, it's yes.
yeah,
We're voice actors, but we're also teachers. Yeah.
yes, exactly. So there was a good combination. I was like, this is what I need more of. So that was like, I purposely looked at different workshops. And because I'd been exposed to other coaches on Clubhouse, like, I knew how coaching could go, like, certain types of coaching and certain types of classes. So of course, I took classes in all the genres, including animation. And then I also had a membership to Gravy for the Brain, which is an
Yeah.
overall site with like tons of
There's a
recorded
lot of stuff
information.
on
Yeah,
there. Oh,
it's
yeah.
so
So
much,
much stuff.
really great for people starting out, but a
Yes.
lot to digest.
Yes,
A
it is.
lot to digest. So that was a place that I did like an overall overview of like, just watch their animation stuff. Every time I saw something that was like a podcast, I'd listen to that. And even though I said I'd left voice acting between the Radio Shack mic and pandemic, I was still going to like Comic-Con. As part of another thing I did. There's a whole nother life I have with video games. But
Right.
I would always go to the voice acting panel at Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Like, just I always
Yeah.
loved that. I've always loved that. Again, back to the animation times with the flip books, I'd be doing the voices for the little flip books I'd make. I'd be doing voices for the stuffed animals, and like, I made little felt finger puppets and was going to put on a whole production of the Nutcracker, but I didn't have enough felt to make all the characters. I only had scraps to work with, but anyway. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, like, animation was always there, but, it wasn't until that kind of pivotal moment in that room, and then going, like, into the different classes and eventually workshops, and having people that I trusted say, like, you know, "You're good at this. You can
You
do
should do
that."
this.
Yeah, and I'm still I do wanna do more of it. You asked that question, what do you wanna do more of? I also
Yeah.
like dubbing, which a lot of people don't. In fact, a
Yeah.
mutual
But you're
f
in the right place for it, and
yeah,
there's a lot of
there's a
it.
lot of it, and I think it's partly, like, my music background. Like, someone actually told me this. They're like, my first coaching session ever, and they're like, "You haven't done this before?" I'm like, "No," and then he goes, "Do you have a music background?" And I went, "Yes."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Yeah, people who have a lot of music background understand this." I'm like, "Yes, of course." Like, the first system I learned was the 4 beep system, which is, like, very natural, like,
Right.
and then you come in, and it's like,
Yes.
this makes sense.
It's like a click track. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Oh,
that part was just like, wow, I'm good at this. It's fun. You get to act. I mean, all of this you get to act, but there's so many characters that opened up, and then live action. The first one was training it with like anime.
okay.
And then I
Okay.
was like, I gotta try live action too. So I did one coaching session with live action, and then I was like, oh, okay, I think I got that. And then I've been in, I've recorded like, I think 4 different shows for dubbing now, but 3 of them I do not think will ever see the light of day, unfortunately. But
Ah, yes.
yes,
Yes. The entertainment industry. Yeah.
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 So
Mhm.
hopefully the 4th will come out, and then that could be a nice announcement someday. And then
Awesome. So
yeah.
here's a question they ask everybody. Did anyone ever say the wrong thing to you? And if that ever happened, how did you cope?
Hmm.
And some people have gone, no one's ever said the wrong thing, which is totally a legit answer, by the way.
I have to think on that. I mean, the first thing that came to mind, I don't know if it was really the wrong thing, but the podcast I had, someone left, I think, oh no, it was an email. They emailed me and they said, like, you have no respect for the material and you should hire a professional. And I'm like, you are listening to a free podcast. like, like, what are you talking about? And I thought to myself, okay, so this book I'm reading right now is set in England, and I do a variety of characters, and they all have English accents. So I thought, like,
Right.
does he just hate my English accent? So I thought, like, okay, so go back, I listened to that episode, and because there's a particular character, and I felt like, did I maybe do him too much over the top, right? And And I was like, no, that wasn't too over the top. And I was like, so I'm not sure what he's talking about. And then, like, surely if he just hates my English accent completely, he would have not listened up to this episode because it's like quite far into the book, you know?
Right.
So why are you complaining now? And it was about that particular, he mentions it. So I was like, I just felt like he was having a bad day or something. And plus,
So how did you deal with it? Do you ignore? Because
I
obviously you still remember it,
Yeah, I
right?
ignored, I laughed actually because of the factors I just told you, kind of like, "Are you really asking me to hire someone? This is free. I do this out of my free time." Um, I had also already been, a moderator and then eventually an administrator in a video game community. And
Mm.
as you can imagine, um, there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff to moderate in a video game community.
Okay.
So I had a
Yeah.
very thick skin. So I think
Okay.
maybe that's also why I just was able to laugh, and
Mm.
I don't know where I read this, but somebody said, okay, it was about love letters. Like you're supposed to keep your love letters, but throw away your hate letters. That doesn't make sense. But
Oh, but the sentiment
the
behind
sentiment
it
behind it
does.
does. Yeah. So I remember thinking like, well, okay. I kind of felt it was a mark of like making it like someone I have a hater out
Oh, I
there,
love
like
that.
yeah. And I
Mhm.
did keep like a really nice email of someone who really enjoyed the podcast and said that his mom was losing her vision and he was so glad and she was so glad they found my podcast because it opened up, like, she could still listen to all these books. And I was like, "Oh
That's
my god,"
beautiful.
and, they said the
Yeah.
way I did it was great, and said a lot of great stuff in my performance, so that was also nice. Um, and it kinda makes me feel bad that I stopped that podcast, but, um
The good news is that, yeah, the accessibility back when you were doing it, you might have been one of the only ones they found, right?
right, that's what I say.
And
So I
nowadays,
don't feel that bad because
there's
there's
a lot,
so much a lot, and in fact, one of
right?
my audiobooks that I did is available on Learning Ally, which
Good.
started for visually impaired, but then is also for
Yes.
anyone with, learning, like,
I'll put learning disabilities.
visual
I'll
yeah.
put Learning Ally. I will put the link to them as well. They do phenomenal work. If you want to volunteer with them as a voice actor, or if you need them, they provide
Yes.
for people who need that. So
And
Learning
they
Ally is
have
fantastic.
professional production. So if
Oh
you
yes,
can work for them, you know that you're, like, up to snuff. And
you're
you're
in good shape.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Ah, let's see. What is any advice you would have for either young artists or adults who are just starting in any of the arts that you do?
Oh. I'd say, okay, we'll take photography first.
Yeah.
Photography is just develop your eye, um, and by that, like, literally take your camera, AKA your phone. You don't have to have actual camera at this point to start with, especially. And take what captures your eye, right? And then share it with people and see what they thought of that. Look at their reactions. Because you're trying to get your vision into the pixels and capture light, as we like to say, but you also want to see like what do people respond to and look at what others have done. You don't have to like study it like to the nth degree, but um sometimes I go to art museums
Mm,
and you could see composition, you see light, you see color, you see storytelling, you see everything. Like, I go to modern and like historical, art.
yeah.
So that's always where you start with because it comes from you. Because everyone's a photographer now, like everybody.
Right.
Like you're doing a selfie, you're doing whatever it is. But if you want to like continue or become professional at it, then you need to like develop your eye and develop a look, but then also then eventually go out and learn from people, whether that's a formal setting. Um,
Mhm.
it could be online, in person. I did things called photo walks. They were free. I think they're still going on. I'm pretty sure they are. You could just join one in a
Yeah.
group and you're with like a group of photographers. And you go and you'll do
Oh,
like a walk somewhere and then you'll come
it's
back
so
later
good.
on and look at people's pictures and compare and you're like, I saw that same scene, but they
Oh.
took it this way,
We
you
got
know.
lucky. We were on a scuba diving trip many years ago with our first underwater housing
Mhm.
for diving. And one of the people at the resort had film, but he was a professional underwater photographer and we had digital. So every day at the dive resort, he would make us download all the pictures we had taken that day and critique us that night.
Whoa.
And then take us underwater and reframe it for us the next day. But we had instant feedback.
Yeah.
In that, well, underwater, basically it was, we had photo swim,
Yeah.
photo float.
Oh, that sounds so fun.
Right? So what would you say for and thank you for that, for voiceover, for someone who's new?
Oh, so that's so for audiobooks, I'll repeat like advice I'd heard, which is the go into a closet and read a book. And if you can do that for a week and not feel like you're bored or going to, tear your hair out, then,
Mhm.
maybe audiobooks is for you. And I say that because I do know a lot of voice actors, narrators, like who'd be like, "Oh, I couldn't do audiobooks," or "I couldn't do audiobooks of X length," right? Because it's really unique in its genre in
Mhm.
voiceover, in the big voiceover umbrella. Now, for
Yeah.
general voiceover, I'd say, well, there's that. It's I want to be a voice actor.com. Yeah, that
Yeah.
one.
This is D Baker, D Bradley Baker has I wanna be a voice
Yes,
actor.com. It's a fantastic website.
it's great. I mean, just do
He's
that,
real.
and then
Yeah, read that.
yeah, read that, and it'll give you so much. But you could start either place, or just start with acting. Even
Oh, yeah.
there's always acting. It, so there's different things for different levels. I was really shy as a kid. And so certain things would get me out of my shell. So sometimes like if you're like I'm self kind of contained and I'm going to learn this certain way, then it's like, oh, gravy for the brain. You know, there's all that stuff you can absorb that way. And then if you want to be outgoing and you're in a bigger market area, as I call it, like city, and you can go in person
Mhm.
and try a workshop. There's always like workshops for beginners. And then,
Oh, yeah.
step back from that, I was like, online, Seattle Voice
Yeah.
Academy. Hello. Um,
Hone your skills.
yes,
Hone 'em.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then you just jump around and see different ones, different workshops, but it's kind of like just try them. And also
Yeah.
do not go out and buy expensive equipment right away. Just
Nope.
don't,
Hold.
don't.
And besides, as she's mentioned, used is a real good idea.
Yes.
People change their equipment all the time. There's no need to spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
Wow. Eileen, thank you so much for is there anything else you wanna add to the conversation today?
Oh, just
Anything we didn't talk about?
this is delightful. Just creative world is like a wonderful place to be in, work in, and play in. So keep doing it.
And when looking at your room and the room where you get to do all your stuff, and she also goes outside to take her all those photographs of all that stuff as well. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to Go to Your Room and Make Stuff, the podcast for artists of any kind who want to make art by themselves. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast in all the places where you find podcasts. Find us on social media. And if you ever have any artists you would like to see featured, please let us know. Now, go to your room and make stuff.